The toil of trace and tail. The sled dogs arrived at Skagway. They were all tired and footsore. Buck's 140 pounds decreased to 115. The rest of the dogs lost even more weight than Buck. There was no power left. They used all the power they had. Every muscle was absolutely tired. And there was a reason for it. In 5 months they traveled 2,500 miles. They arrived at Skagway with their last strength. Mush on, poor sore feet. This is the last. Then you will get a very long rest, the driver said to his sled dogs. The drivers really hoped for a long rest. But there were too many men who rushed into the Klondike. And these men always needed sled dogs. 3 days passed. Buck and his mates were still very tired and weak. On the 4th day 2 men from the United States came and bought them for a song. The men called each other Hal and Charles. Charles was a middle-aged man. Hal was about 20 years old. Both men were really out of place. Then some money passed between the Scotchman and the 2 new men. And Buck knew that the Scotchman was gone from his life. Buck and his mates came to the new camp. Everything was in total disorder. Buck noticed a woman. She was Charles's wife and Hal's sister. The men called her Mercedes. Buck watched them carefully. There was no method to their work. They rolled the tent wrongly. Their dishes were dirty and unwashed. They loaded and unloaded their clothes again and again. They did not know how to do anything right. Later 3 men from a tent nearby looked at Hal, Charles, and Mercedes. You have a very heavy load. And I feel bad saying this, but I would not carry that tent if I were you, said one of the 3 men. Impossible. What can I do without a tent? Cried Mercedes. It is spring. And you will not have any cold weather, the men answered. Mercedes shook her head. Charles and Hal put more stuff on the top of the load. You think it will go? One of the men asked. Why not? Charles asked. Oh, that is all right. I just wondered. That is all, the man said. Charles turned his back. He continued to arrange his load. Of course, the dogs can haul all day with that load behind them, said the second man. Of course. Mush. Mush on, said Hal. The dogs tried to move forward. Then they stopped. They could not move the sled. The lazy dogs, I'll show them, Hal cried. The poor dears. Now you must promise me that you will not be rude with them for the rest of the trip. Or I will not go with you, cried Mercedes. You don't know anything about dogs. Leave me alone. They are lazy, I tell you. You have to whip them. Ask anyone. Ask one of those men, her brother said. Mercedes looked at them angrily. There was pain in her face. They are as weak as water. They need rest, answered one of the men. They do not need rest, said Hal. Mercedes suddenly started to defend her brother. Never mind that man. You drive our dogs, and you do what you think is best with them, she said. Again Hal used his whip. The dogs released all their strength. The sled was very heavy. The dogs stood still and breathed fast. Mercedes came up to Buck with tears in her eyes. You poor dears. Please, pull hard. Then he will not whip you, she cried. Buck did not like her. She could not help him with her empty words. One of the men said, I just want to tell you that you cannot help them with that sled. Make your load less. And then your dogs will haul your sled. Hal made the load less. The heavy sled moved forward. They ran up the street. The dogs did not stop. They were angry because of the heavy load. Buck ran fast and the team followed his lead. A lot of their stuff fell down on the road. Hal cried, "Whoa! Whoa!" But the dogs did not mind him at all. The sled dogs ran fast up the street. kind citizens gathered up some of the scattered stuff. Also, they said to them, half the load and twice the dogs if they wanted to reach Dawson. Hal, Charles and Mercedes listened to them. They threw the tent, canned goods, metal dishes and some blankets away. Mercedes cried when her brother threw her clothes bags on the ground. She did same with the clothes of her husband and brother. She was like a tornado. The load was now a bit less. But still it was still very heavy. Later Hal and Charles bought 6 dogs. At that moment the dog team had 14 sled dogs. But these new dogs were not good. They had short fur and weak legs. They did not know anything. Buck and his dog mates looked at these new dogs angrily. The new dogs had a broken spirit. Buck quickly showed them their places. The sled dogs were underway again. The drivers were very glad and happy. They saw other people on sled going from Dawson. But they did not see a sled with 14 dogs. That was because one sled could not carry the food for 14 dogs. But they did not know that. The sled dogs were already tired. Buck was sad in his heart. They were back on the same road between Saltwater and Dawson again. The heart of every dog was in pain. Buck was not sure of these 2 men and the woman. The drivers did not know how to do anything. There was no order or discipline. These people were absolutely not adjusted to the north. Besides, they did not know how to work with their dogs. They did not know how to work themselves. Some days they did not make even 10 miles. They could not manage the underfeeding. The new dogs had a big appetite. Their drivers gave them double rations. It was a big mistake. Half of the dog food was already finished, and they traveled only a quarter of the distance. They started to give less food, which was not enough for hard work. The sled dogs were bags of bones. They began to die one after another. They reached the Newfoundland first. The drivers were not kind anymore. Arctic travel became really hard for them. Mercedes no longer cried over the dogs. She cried only over herself. She always quarreled with her husband and brother. There was no patience in the harness. Their muscles, bones and hearts were in pain. They used a lot of hard words and sharp speech. The endless family quarrel was a part of the day. Mercedes was absolutely helpless. She always complained about everything. She did not mind the dogs. She was sore and tired. She weighed 120 pounds. Her weight was too much for the weak and hungry dogs. Once her husband and brother took her off the sled. Mercedes started to cry like a child. Then they came back for her and put her on the sled again. The drivers were not kind to their animals. Hal's theory said that one must work very hard. That is why he often used his whip. At the 5 Fingers the dog food finished. Later an old woman sold them some frozen horse skin. The frozen horse skin was like iron. The sled dogs felt a big pain in their stomachs. It was undigestible. Buck was as in a nightmare. He pulled when he could. When he could not pull, he fell down. And then he stood on his feet again because of the whip and club. Buck felt the broken heart inside of every dog. But Buck's heart was not broken. The man in the red sweater proved that. There were only 7 dogs in the harness. These dogs looked like real skeletons. All sense of pain left them. They could not feel the whip and club anymore. The light of life was very weak inside of them. Once one dog fell down and could not rise. Hal took his revolver and shot the dog. Then he cut the dead dog and gave it to the hungry dogs. The next day another dog died. Then, there were only 5 dogs in the harness. It was a beautiful spring. The sun rose earlier and set later. New life was everywhere. The ice began to melt. But they could not see that. In the middle of all this beauty the 2 men, the woman and the huskies tried to reach their destination. With tears in their eyes they reached John Thornton's camp. They stopped slowly. The sled dogs fell down on the ground. Mercedes dried her eyes. Charles sat down to rest. And Hal talked to John Thornton. John Thornton understood that these people would not listen to his words. They told us that the bottom could fall. And that we needed to stop. They told us that we could not make it to White River. And here we are, Hal said. And they told you true. The bottom can fall at any moment. Only fools could make it. Let me tell you straight, I will not risk my body on that ice for all the gold in Alaska, John Thornton answered. That is because you are not a fool, I think. We will go to Dawson. Buck! Get up! Mush on! Hal said. But the sled dogs could not get up. Hal used his whip without mercy. Only one dog could get up. Buck could not move. All his power left him. Hal hit him again and again. Thornton wanted to say something. But then he changed his mind. Buck did not want to get up. He had a feeling that catastrophe was coming. Buck felt numb. His body was so far away. Suddenly John Thornton jumped on the man with the whip. Mercedes cried. Charles did not get up. John Thornton came closer to Buck. If you beat this dog again, I will kill you, said John Thornton. It is my dog. Go out of my way or I will beat you. I will go to Dawson, said Hal. Thornton stood between him and Buck. He took out his hunting knife. Mercedes cried again. John Thornton and Hal started to fight. John Thornton won the fight. Later Hal, Charles and Mercedes went away down the river. Buck heard them. Thornton knelt beside Buck. His hands started to search for broken bones. Suddenly the sled jumped into the air. Then the whole section of ice gave way. The dogs and humans went under the ice. There was only a big hole. The bottom fell out of the trail. You poor devil, said John Thornton to Buck.